This interview was a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's oral history program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on November the 10th, 1970. The interviewer on this tape is not identified. The interviewee is Professor Valerie Colvin, and that's capital Colvin, of the Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. The interview took place in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is being re-recorded on October the 20th, 1986 for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
One, two, three. We're recording.
All right. I'm Valerie Colvin. I was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1904. Oh, he says me too. My interview. But I went to school in Mobile, Alabama, in a private school until it closed, and then I went to the public high school. I attended college at a church school in Alabama, the Women's College of Alabama, which now, like many colleges, has turned into a coeducational institution. It is known as Huntington College. From there and throughout my college years, I taught in the recreation department in Mobile, Alabama, and my first boss was Dr. Jackson Sharman, who finally was the head of the University of Alabama's Department of Health and Physical Education. When he took a look at me, he said, "She'll not last 2 weeks." But I fooled him, and I stayed on, and he learned that wiry little people sometimes have more stamina than big, fat ones. That's something we learn later on in life. Then, finally, Dr. Sharman said to me, "You need to get out of the field of recreation," because when I graduated in home economics, I decided that wasn't for me. So I went back and taught in the recreation department in Mobile for 2 years. Then Dr. Sharman said, "You need to go get a master's degree." So he took me to Columbia University, and there I got a master's degree, although they looked at me in horror and said, "How do you expect to get a master's in physical education when your undergraduate work is in home economics?" I said, "My science, my knowledge of people, my experiences on the playground all qualify me to go on in this field," and so they were kind enough to let me. When I finished at Columbia, they decided that since I had a background in recreation, I'd better go into that field, but not for me. I wanted to teach on the college level, and like all young people, even today, I had my mind made up what I wanted to do. An opportunity came for me to come to Oklahoma. I wrote my family, Alabama, and said I was coming to Oklahoma. Now, what did they think of Oklahoma? Like most people, they thought anything west of the Mississippi was still back in the war years of Indians and rioters and what have you. But nevertheless,
Let me stop you.
all right.
In those early days, just what did you teach? Recreation. This covers
All right. When I first started in recreation, I had charge of the swimming pool, and then also we had such things as storytelling. We had music contests, record recognition. We had competitive sports in terms of 3 different areas of competition for the boys. Now, the girls, even then, were neglected, but we had softball, we had football, we had track and field. I think those were the major things. We had arts and crafts. We worked in the schools. Perhaps some of you have remembered about Milwaukee and the lighted schoolhouse. That meant that they kept the schoolhouse open with the recreation departments after school hours. We did this in Mobile, and we used the facilities of the school plus the playground. After I started working on a year-round basis, then I was in charge of all of the women's competition, and we had competitive sports for the women in basketball, in softball, in swimming, in tennis, and these were industrial leagues and things of this kind. On the staff in the recreation department, now this is getting off of what's happening in Oklahoma, but it does give you an idea that way back in 1924, 5, and 6, that recreation departments were functioning and were doing many of the things that they are doing today, although perhaps not on as large a scale as today. But we directed a recreational camp for children in the summertime and that type of thing. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Now go back to what
Oh,
your
where
family
was
said
I?
when you were coming to Oklahoma.
Oh, they just knew I was going to get killed, but sure enough, I didn't. However, I'll have to admit, I had been to camp in northern New York State. When I said I was coming to Stillwater, the railroad man said to me, "I don't know where that is." He said, "I can get you as far as St. Louis. And when you get to St. Louis, you ask them how to get to Stillwater." Now, this may seem queer to you, but this is the gospel truth. And so I got off in Perry, Oklahoma. I had come from northern New York State where the trees were turning, where everything was beautiful. The lakes were around every curve of the road, and I had also just been up to Canada after it. I hit Oklahoma when there was no water, when they'd had a hot summer. It was dry, and I thought, Satany, I had come to the wrong place, especially when a gentleman from the South, from Mississippi, met me, and he knew what I was seeing for the first time, and all the way from Perry. Of course, if you didn't know that to get from Perry to Stillwater was a major problem, you had to be met, or you had to wait for the mail truck to get over here. There was no bus, nothing. All the way over, Colonel Sutherland proceeded to tell me how the water was turned on from 12 to 1 o'clock only, and that you had to draw enough water to take care of your cooking, your bathing, and so forth and so on. It seems that the spring before in Stillwater, Boomer Lake had gone over the dam, and that was wonderful. But summer had come along, and the water supply was down low again. Now, things have changed. But those people who lived through to see that first spill over the dam really had an experience worth remembering. Well, so I started out here. Being from Alabama, I had one big problem. That was they could not understand my speech. I sent a young lady over to the university hospital to get a heart check, Heart check. And the doctor at the infirmary called me and said, "What in the world did you send this young lady over here for?" She came over and wanted to know when she had written a hot check. She was so disturbed. The doctor was from Mississippi, and she knew I wanted the young lady to have her heart checked. But we had many a good laugh over that. Well, now, when I came, the young ladies were dressed with what they're wearing now, long three-quarter socks. Bloomers that almost met the knee, too. So we got the dress changed and got them in ankle socks. You see how things go if you just wait the pendulum swings back again. And so now the three-quarter socks are in style. But we did a number of changes. As I look back, I can see us all over the campus. The department, when I came, had 3 women teachers, 3 men teachers, and the 2 departments, men and women, were separated. Now they are together, and we should be together. But we were over in Gardner Hall. Now, Gardner Hall should have many memories for many of you people who have been to Oklahoma A&M. We were in the two ends of the building with the dressing room in between. Actually, many things happened in Gardner Hall. It changed its character almost as often as one changes style in attire. We were in two wings, then we were in one wing. We had a library. We had what was a shower room changed into a faculty office. First it was used as a corrective room. We did everything in that building, from playing in the little narrow hallways, things that you wouldn't think could be done, but we did them. And actually, our students who went out from there learned that you can conduct a program if you have imagination, if you have creativeness, if you have the desire to get things done regardless of facilities. I'd like to run with you over the playfields. When I first came and we were in Gardner Hall, our playfield was right back of the building. We went out the back door and there we were. They'd never had archery, so I set up an archery field. And I was young. I didn't know how to read catalogs, and so I ordered what I thought was a good buy. I ordered some archery equipment that was aluminum arrows. They sounded good, and it said they were $2. I thought that was a good buy, so I ordered 24 of them, and to my horror and surprise, they were not $2 a dozen, they were $2 a piece. The head of the department asked me if I would check more carefully after that, which I assure you I had to do. Well, we played there for a while, and then we moved and had North Hall was built, and we had a building out. We had a gymnasium in the basement of that building. Then we had playfields galore, where now stands Wilhelm Hall and Stout Hall and Kerr and so forth. All of this was known as the Roth Track, and we had playfields out there that were the envy of many other schools on the campus, but now they're all taken up, either with parking lots or buildings, many parking lots. And I frankly say I resent that, although I know that we must accept change. Well, let's see some other places we were on the campus. Off the campus, I should say. For we started bowling. This became a very interesting sport, and so we went downtown to bowl. We bowled down at the American Legion Hall, and students had to get down there as best they could. This went on for quite a while. We also skated in the skating rink downtown. But the gentleman who owned the skating rink was much nicer. The thing he did was to send a bus out at his own expense and carry the students down to the skating rink. This he did until finally, as you might guess, he went broke. He gave out. But we did enjoy this while it lasted. Am I going too slow here? Other things that I remember are experiences over in the old gymnasium. This, of course, was used jointly by the men and the women and by interscholastics. This was before we had the field house. This was the place on the campus. Not only did we have classes, not only did we have the interscholastics and the intramurals, but in addition to that, the dances on the campus were held in that building. I can well remember one spring when the engineers were having their St. Pat's ball, and of course the Aggie students had stolen the bull. or the engineers had stolen the bull. I've forgotten which way it was, but anyhow, I can see the confusion that went on there. They used to steal the queens and what have you, and they had a tomato and an egg fight out in front. We think of the young people today. They used to do silly things way back then, too. But it all worked out all right when the dean or the assistant dean of the College of Agriculture, who had been on the team that had won this trophy, came over and said, "Now, you young folks, you didn't have a thing to do with that. I'm the one that ought to get mad, and I'm not mad. We're going to get that trophy back, so let's cut this out." And in his calm way, and because they knew he was telling the truth, they dispersed, and the dance went on. Now, that old gymnasium had a long story. The repair on it was very costly, and it was not kept up, I'm sorry to say. It rained in it, the floor warped, and finally I said, somebody's going to get killed here before they will do anything about this gymnasium. Fortunately, we only had several serious accidents. No one was actually killed. But the old gymnasium now isn't used by the art department. You never know how things will end up. We did succeed in getting a new floor in and getting it painted and getting the roof fixed so that it didn't leak before we finally left it. The little swimming pool that was our only place for teaching swimming, I thought, well, now, if we could get the wives of faculty interested in trying to encourage the administration to do something about this small pool, perhaps maybe if we had a children's swimming program, they would come over here with the children and they would see how horrible this was. We started the children's swimming program. It was quite a success. The parents came, and what did they see? They saw their children learning to swim. They did not see the poor facilities. They did not see the need for a bigger pool. But I would go around and say, would you mind writing the president and telling him you think this? Now, don't tell him I said so, but do tell him how terrible this pool is. So some of them did do this, and to them we're very grateful. But that pool is very small compared to the pools that we now find on the campus, and we're very grateful for those. Now let me see. Stop here. What do you want me? Thinking back as to the students of former years, one of the characteristics was that they pitched in and helped plan and conduct the program. I can remember when we needed to have a hockey field lined off. We didn't call on the maintenance people to do this for us. They took hose and went out and dug the lines. They took the lima and lined off the fields. This was their contribution to the department. When I first came, we had class hockey, class softball. In other words, everything was done by the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. This soon changed to, this was on an intramural basis. This soon changed to where classes were not as interested in class participation as in their living groups. And so the intramural program changed to a broader and a wider program of intramurals on the campus by living groups, whether they be sorority, independent, or dormitory. The Women's Recreation Association was a very strong organization on the campus at that time. The local organization also belonged to the state organization, which was known as OARFCW. Oklahoma Athletic and Recreation Federation of College Women, which is a part of the national organization. Back in those days, it was felt that competition for women was very wrong. And so we had what is known as play days. Now, a play day meant that schools came together for a sport, or more than one sport, and they were mixed up. The whole idea was that this was not only an athletic event, but a social event, so that you were trying to learn something about your fellow man or your fellow women on other campuses. When a college would go to one of these play days, they would be divided up into various teams, whatever the theme of the play day was. For example, if it was an Olympic play day, you might be on the Ethiopian team or the Australian team with people from other colleges. We soon found that the students who went to these really wanted more than just to get acquainted, and that it was very hard to take a hockey team or a basketball team or a volleyball team and say, you play with these strangers, because after all, teamwork is the basis of a game. So the next step was to try to take the forward line on a hockey team and put them with the backfield from another college and see how that worked. Well, that worked for a couple of years, but we soon found out that that wasn't the answer either. And so we went to sports days. Now, on a sports day, you take a team which represents your institution and you play competitively with other colleges. This has been in existence for quite some time now, and one of the things that's happening is that the smaller colleges say we can't compete with the larger colleges, and this is very true. There probably will now develop a system whereby some of the teams will be rated and you will play in either an A or a B team. Back in those days, we never once thought of sending teams for competition with other schools with expenses paid. The students paid their own way. Now last year, and I'm bringing things up to date, last year we sent students to Brigham Young University to compete in gymnastics. We sent them to the University of Illinois to compete in track and field. We sent them to New Orleans, Louisiana to compete in badminton, and we sent them to Denton, Texas to compete in golf. These students represented the university and were the first teams that were officially OSU competitive intercollegiate sports for women, with at least part of the expenses picked up by the recreation department of the school, of the university. So we've seen quite a change here in the type of competition for women. Uh, one of the things that has concerned us is transportation on this type of event. And it's been interesting to note that at times the university carried an insurance policy on these people. At other times we had to get this through the American Railway Express, but always we have felt that this is one of the things that we must have when we send groups out to represent the university. Now let's go just a little bit to the curriculum. When I first came here, a major in physical education had to have 8 hours of foreign language, 16 hours of science, in addition to their English and their history and the other things. But the two principal things that discouraged many of them were the number of hours of science and the foreign languages. This has changed. We no longer require a foreign language. However, our science requirement has gone up. For after all, the field of health and physical education is one of both the art of teaching and the science of understanding the human body. And so we feel that these are the two areas that we need to stress. The teaching of students, not only sports and activities, but how to understand the workings of the nervous system, the physiology of exercise. And so the curriculum has changed where we used to have foreign language, and I don't disapprove of it because I had it too. But on the other hand, we now have emphasis on more physiology of exercise, so that not only do they actually get the facts, but they go into a laboratory and experience through personal laboratory and research exercises some of these things that many times I think before this we learned by rote. They are learning by actually doing the things. Cut that off a minute. When in 1929 there was a physical education requirement for women of 2 full years. This program was set up so that each student had to meet a swimming requirement, had to meet a dance requirement, had to meet a sports requirement, and then was permitted to choose from any of the previous activities as to what they wanted to take that fourth semester. In about 1945, no, it's later than that, in about 1955, the university had an ad hoc committee that attempted to study the desirability of the 2-year requirement of physical education for women. It was reduced to a 1-year requirement. This meant that we had to take a hard look at our offerings and attempt to adjust the curriculum to still give them the possibility of developing some skills and some knowledges, and yet do it in a way that would have greater appeal for them. We changed then from a strict requirement to a selective requirement. You were required to take 2 semesters of physical education, but you had your choice of selecting which activities you wished. For a while, we attempted to have a swimming requirement, which said if you do not know how to swim, you must take swimming. This made a bunch of lies on the campus, as well as making lies out of the faculty. For we stood before a class and said, you must take the swimming requirement or you must take swimming. Yet we had no way to enforce this because the registrar was not going to check every graduate. In fact, I remember one year when a young lady called me. She was on mortarboard, and she said, do I have to take that swimming? And I said, you're supposed to. You're a leader on the campus. You ought to uphold the things that you know are required or are part of a program. But I'll have to tell you honestly that you don't have to do it. Only if your conscience directs you to do it do you have to go take it. She said, what time shall I be over there? And she came. This is typical of true leadership. She knew what was right and she did it. However, we soon discarded that. They now have the opportunity for taking swimming, but they are not required to take the swimming. Many universities have had to face this fact that unless you can enforce a regulation, you should not have the regulation. Although I thoroughly approve of people learning to swim. In fact, if I go back, one of the greatest surprises I had when I came to Oklahoma was that there were people who had reached the age of 18, 16, 20 years of age who did not know how to swim. I was amazed because I grew up on Mobile Bay. I learned to swim when everybody should learn to swim. That is in the early childhood years. I'd like to make a comment here. It's very difficult in a required physical education program to teach people who have reached adulthood skills which they should have learned in childhood. When I faced the ad hoc committee that was studying the required physical education program, I said, if the state of Oklahoma had physical education at its proper place, that is, a good program on the elementary level, if then they had an enlarged program on the junior high, with a selective and choice program on the senior high, then in my opinion, the obligation of the university would be to provide facilities for the pursuit of recreational activities with no requirement. Now, this may be heresy to my own profession, but it's what I definitely feel. Oklahoma has improved in its overall program of physical education, particularly on the elementary level, but it has a long way to go. We are behind many other states. However, we have made progress, and of that I am real proud. Okay. Looking back as to some of the activities that people think of as new, we have taught for years golf in the program. Miss Flora May Ellis, who was head of the department until she retired in 1959, started golf and probably was one of the first people. As to some of the activities that people think of as new, we have taught for years golf in the program. Miss Flora May Ellis, who was head of the department until she retired in 1959, started golf and probably was one of the first people that used rhythm, records, and music as a means of teaching the golf swing. Many of the professional golfers now have records out to do this. Miss Ellis did it years and years and years ago. Miss Ellis also had a social dance class that was one of the most popular activities on the campus. She taught it in the old gymnasium. When the student union was built, they came to Miss Ellis and said, "You've got to move to the student union." You see, they dared in those days to tell you what you had to do. Miss Ellis did move to the student union, and there were times when there were 500 students in her social dance group, which met at night and which was a club. She had students acting as her assistants, and this was perhaps one of the most popular activities on the campus. The students paid a small fee, I believe it was $1, to take this class for a whole semester. It was non-credit. It was something that they enjoyed doing, which of course is the way all activities should be done. So golf has long been a part of our program. I believe the first golf class was taught here in 1929 and had a total of 9 students, women only, enrolled. Now in the new building you will find golf taught on a coeducational basis. We have women instructors, and this has been one of the things that we have been most interested in, and that is that the men accept women instructors in physical education as long as they know their stuff. They have to be good, and we've been fortunate in having excellent instructors. Badminton, per se, is taught on a coeducational basis. Fencing is very popular on the campus. Going back to the golf just a minute, we now have 8 classes in golf closed at around 30 people per class, and these are coeducational. We have an indoor range, whereas we used to wake in the hallways of North Hall, any spot that we could find. In other words, we used the dressing room for putting greens and even used, pardon me, the restroom.
You do have a golf course.
Now the university has a golf course, and we have an indoor golf range with a net and so forth and so on. Uh, Beside golf, I was mentioning the fencing. This is a very popular activity with both the men and the women, and it's been interesting to see the caliber of man taking fencing. When it was first offered, I would say, and pardon me, gentlemen, if you happen to hear this, I would say that the men who came over were a bit effeminate. Uh, but this has changed. We now have people from the speech department, drama students. We have athletes. We have men, both those of slender build and those of athletic build, that are very interested and do fencing competitively. They have a club known as the Sword and Mask Club, and they take part in the state tournaments and have also gone out of the state for several events. Scuba diving is one of the things that has recently been added to the program. In fact, this is a very new innovation. The little pool would not have permitted this, but the deep well in the indoor pool in the new building is very, very good for this type of thing. This class is limited in number, and we could fill it many, many, many times. One of the things that we wouldn't have thought of in the early years is a course in body mechanics. This is offered only to women and is a course for self-improvement and development. It is very popular with the women at the present time. In fact, not only do we have students taking it, but we have staff and faculty classes offered in the evenings in this. This is one of the things that is an innovation in the program, in that we do offer many activities for staff and faculty since we've moved into the new building. Body mechanics perhaps has more appeal to the young women than any single other course, and is comparable to the weight training classes that the men have. In fact, they sometimes go up into the weight training room and use this. Cut that off a minute. Back in the former years, we did not have any courses such as one would find today. Such courses as physical education for the handicapped, physical education for the mentally retarded. We did not sponsor any such such short courses or special sessions such as gross motor therapy for children with learning disabilities. We now have courses that are taught in cooperation with the College of Education in their special education department. These things we didn't think of back in 1929. Physical education we thought of purely as activity. Now we are beginning to understand that we have a tool and we have an area for helping those who need physical help. So that a major nowadays has many areas in which he may choose to use his profession, not only just teaching, but also going into rehabilitation way, church groups, and so forth. I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the things that some of our majors are doing at the present time. We find quite a few of them in the service of our country, of course. Of these gentlemen, we are proud. We also have two women, one a major and one a lieutenant colonel, one in the Marine Corps and one in physical therapy. We have one MD who is at the Albert Einstein Memorial Neurological Center of Temple University. This young lady, we are very proud. We have 5 flying Aggies. One who is one of 300 women in the United States who has received a ATR, Air Transport Rating. It's interesting to note that she is teaching aeronautical science in California at the present time. We have another that is up in Minnesota working for a commercial airline. We have one in Wichita who is doing the same thing in addition to teaching. In other words, she's moonlighting. We have students who are building camps and running them. One in Minnesota, and year before last, there was a full-page spread in the Minneapolis paper concerning this young lady and the 4 city girls who went to the country and built a camp. So you see, when you take a course, and we do offer, in fact, the first camp leadership course was taught in 1929 when I came. I remember then that when we took our first outdoor cookout, I bought T-bone steaks at Piggly Wiggly for 10 cents apiece. That is the truth. 10 cents per T-bone steak. That seems far-fetched, but so it went in that time. In fact, you might be interested to know that when I came to Oklahoma A&M, my salary was $2,400. That is $2,400. Graduates of today will say, how did you exist? Well, remember, those T-bone steaks just cost a dime. I did better than you're doing today. And I thought it was a pretty good job because, remember, that was 1929, the year of the Great Depression. Sometimes I wonder if it would not be good if we did not have another depression so we would learn to appreciate the wonderful things that we have today.
That's right. No, now, there's one other thing, Professor, that you have just said nothing about. I think you're pretty well thought of here. They named a new center for you or something, didn't they?
Yes, they named the building after me.
A building. It's quite a building.
Yes, it is quite a building. Perhaps I'd like to tell you just a little bit about this building, if I may, because I think perhaps maybe it may be a challenge to other people. This is a unique building in that first it definitely was, it came about because of student instigation. They wanted a recreational building. In fact, they demanded a recreational building. They assessed themselves a fee. They had a committee appointed, and they haunted the department and said, this we want. So then Dean Swearingen, who was the vice president of business affairs at that time, formed a committee, and there were representatives from the student body, representatives from the architect's office, from the Department of Health and Physical Education, and we spent many hours going over this. But it was the students that really and truly ramrodded this building and saw it to completion. They first wanted something of their very own, and they wanted nothing to do with the administration. But as we met with them and as we talked, they began to see that they could not operate a building, that they had to have some guidance. And so with their general good sense, when you get down and talk with them, they said, all right, let's make this a joint affair. So the building has 3 purposes. Its first purpose is instruction. Its second purpose is an intramural program. Its third purpose is a recreational facility. And as such, it is serving all 3 purposes. The morning hours are reserved for instruction. The part of the afternoon hours are for intramurals, and the evening hours are plain recreation. Now, this building is also unique in that it is kept open every day of the week, including Sundays. Dr. Bennett would probably turn over in his grave if he knew that we were conducting activities in one of the buildings on the campus on Sunday. For I can remember when once I wanted to have a practice in the swimming pool on Sunday, and he heard about it. He said, "Not on the Sabbath." I believe that which is wholesome and that which is good for the body is also good for the soul. So I approve of the building being open on Sunday. I think it's a very fine idea. The students I would like to pay tribute to the students. We have a young man on the staff who came to us from Michigan State University last year, and he paid tribute to them in this fashion. He said, "I've never seen students who have kept a building as clean and who have been as respectful of all parts of the building and the equipment in it as the students here at OSU." When we opened the building, one of the things that they said was, "This is a show place, but we believe that we should set standards. Now, let's not have the smell like a gymnasium. Let's keep it clean. Let's make some regulations." The young man who came as the person in charge of the recreation division said, "I will not have them in here without being properly dressed. We will have on shirts or T-shirts or sweatshirts. We will have on decent shoes and so forth." Now, some people on the staff looked at him and said, "Now, you can't get these Aggies to do this." May I tell you, Aggies can do anything. When they are challenged, they will rise to the demands made of them. This makes me go back and think of something. When the Union was built, many people looked at it in horror and said, "Oh, those cowboys, they're going over there in their smelly clothes and dirty boots, and they're going to sit in that French lounge, and it's going to be terrible." I don't believe that anybody can walk into the French lounge today and say that Dr. Bennett was not right when he said, "Surround people with the beautiful. Give people that which is fine, and they will rise to match it." And I believe that this has been very true of the present-day students as well as the students in the days when the Union was first open. Yes, the building serves not only the students. We had a daily attendance of 6,500 last year, with in the swimming pool 600 daily in the swimming pool. This seems almost unbelievable. Now, that's the outdoor pool in the summertime. Now, this is non-credit activity that I'm referring to here. So I'm trying to point out that institutions do need to have a facility that makes it possible for students to do wholesome recreation or to take part in wholesome recreation. I was interested in one young chap who said to me, "Say, Miss Colvin, this building sure is saving me an awful lot of money. Now just bring my date over here and we play paddleball. Doesn't cost me anything." When the building first opened, we did have some criticism in that the fee, some of the students said, "We didn't vote for that fee. It was assessed on us." However, when you move out of a university setting and into a community, many of you belong to country clubs. If you belong to a country club, even the cheapest one costs you $100 a year. Oklahoma State University has a country club on this campus, not only with the facilities, but also with a staff to teach you the activities. We're the one school in the state that has squash. Paddleball is perhaps one of the most interesting activities. The infirmary said we were going to have to take out additional insurance because so many people almost killed themselves learning to play paddleball. paddleball, for those of you who may not know what it is a safer way to play handball. At least you don't have swollen hands when you finish because you play with a racket or a paddle. And it has been very popular in the building. The one thing that I'd like to comment on is that we do lack outdoor facilities. We do not have enough play fields. The other thing that's bad with the building is you can soon get spoiled by anything. Some of our recent graduates have found it difficult to move into teaching situations where they have poor facilities, where they have poor equipment. And one of them recently came back on the campus and said, "Say, Miss Colvin, we need to know how to make do." That was one of the things that I always preached, that if you had to buy it yourself, if you had to borrow it, even if you had to steal it, go out and get that which you need, and that imagination, creativeness, initiative, ingenuity were the basis for successful teaching, regardless of what field you happen to be in. When I retired in 1969, the alumni were determined that the building should be named for me. This was indeed a great honor. It is now known as the Colvin Physical Education Center. Frankly, this means more to me, the last two words, last three words, Physical Education Center. For people go, but the whole idea of my profession is one which I hope will always be on this campus. In the center, we do have some unique things, and I would like to share these with you. The physiology lab is quite a place on the campus. And recently, when we were showing some people through the campus, one of the people from agriculture said, "Say, they're doing the same thing for human beings now that we've been doing for the animals for a long time." In this laboratory, we have a treadmill, we have a pulmo analyzer, we have a Bolex movie camera, we have Circuit Closed TV, we can calibrate the oxygen depth, the endurance ability, and all sorts of things that are done in research. This is because the graduate program has grown to such an extent that we are now moving into the research field, human research, human physiology. When in 1929, or in about 1935, I think we had 2 graduate students. This has grown to the extent of now we have enrolled this fall 37 master students and 23 doctoral candidates. Of course, the doctoral candidates are in the field of higher education with an emphasis in our field. So this gives you a little idea of the fact that as OSU has grown, so has the department. As life changes in the world, the need for greater understanding of activity still prevails, and it is my hope that someday.
There is no sign-off for this interview. Obviously, the interviewer ran out of recording tape before Professor Colvin finished her remarks. There is no indication in the records that this material is continued on any other living legend reel-to-reel master tape or anywhere else in this collection.